Good evening.
Yeah, thank you, sir, and good evening, everybody. Welcome to this two-day workshop. What I have planned to do over these next 2 days is very simple. I'm going to look at uh, the entire process of publication, break them down into smaller pieces, and look at where uh, a large majority of the papers get rejected. So that's the whole idea of looking at this. So first of all, it's very nice to see that there are quite a few senior professors here in this group that we have of the participants, and I can see a few research scholars as well. So therefore, it's a very good mix of people, and I would like to learn from the senior people and the youngsters as much as I hope I would be able to deliver to all of you. So once again, welcome, and let me share the slide to you. I'll put my video off, um, and straightway I'll go to share a little bit of the rules of the workshop. You are free to stop me anywhere if you're unable to follow me. A. B. You're welcome to stop me anywhere where you feel a much better point can be put across through you. So let this be a collaborative work and not a monologue. I really do not appreciate monologue. One of the concerns that I have is that I can only see my screen and the slide that is put up here, and I cannot see all of you. That's a constraint, but let's live with that constraint, and let's try and do whatever best we can do out of the 3 hours that we have between today and tomorrow. So let me start off with uh, welcoming all of you to a wonderful journey. Now, you know, if you look at the professional joy and excitement that a researcher has when one receives an acceptance letter after a long drawn out process in which you have diligently responded to, you've first worked on your research and then diligently responded to what the editor has said, what the reviewers have said. Many a times you also see another associate editor also commenting in it, because that associate editor happens to be an expert in the area in which you have worked. So this picture depicts all that troublesome journey that you have gone through. Now there are those stages of dejections also that happens when you get a rejection letter. So while there is on one hand an extreme amount of joy, the other side you've got an extreme sense of dejection when a rejection letter comes in. The rejection letter further hits you hard because the reviewers' comments sometimes are very, very tough, very, very harsh. And if you have been working on a paper diligently and everything has been moving very smoothly, and at the last minute it gets rejected. So all of these are sure reasons to get dejected. So welcome to a wonderful journey, and I hope to take all of you through this journey where we will have together some amount of learning in terms of what does it need to do to transform an idea to a paper, to getting published. So what are those strategies? What are those strategies for successful publication? So to begin with, this is what I'm trying to cover over these 2 days. So what I'll do is I'll look at first, why does one need to publish? What is the need at all to publish? Why do you want to publish? For whom do you want to publish? What gets published? What are the various stages of the research process? How should you write a manuscript? I will discuss on some of the elements of the research process and try and give you tips in various places, which would be, I believe, handy when you start writing. All of you know that academic writing is different from the writing that we have in, let's say, if you have to write a an article in a newspaper, that would be a little different from how the research writing happens. We will look at the publishing landscape, and we will look at I'll try and take you from through into a reviewer's mind as well. Now, I'm also a reviewer to some of the journals. I've reviewed articles in ABDC journals. I've reviewed articles in Scopus index journals. So I will take you through a reviewer's mind as well. And hopefully, over these 2 days, you will have a lot of things to take from these sessions. Uh, Before I start with uh, you know the entire session, let me give you a little bit of a background about myself. I My education has been a mechanical engineer from Osmania University. I did my PG from IIM Kozhikode. I did my PhD from Aligarh Muslim University, and I'm happy to see a few research scholars from my alma mater, AMU, here as well. Uh, my research focus essentially is on subsistence marketplaces and supply chain, especially agri supply chain. My research borrows knowledge from supply chain, marketing, economics, sustainability, and related areas. My research methodologies are, of late I'm getting more interested towards qualitative method because I'm finding that the the sample that I work with, uh, working with them and then getting quantitative data and analyzing it, sometimes it becomes a little tough. So my focus now largely is on qualitative. That does not mean that I'm not doing quantitative research. My current work that is happening is on both. It has both qualitative and quantitative as well. Case studies, I have developed about, I think at this stage it's about 15 case studies. um, I My research methodology also includes a lot of secondary data analysis. Some of my case studies have a mix of primary and secondary, but largely secondary data. So it's a mix of quantitative, qualitative case study, survey, secondary data analysis, something which most of you do in your research as well. So let's start off with why publish. If you could tell me something about your motivations for publication, why do you think we publish? I'm leaving the floor open since I cannot see you. There is as I said, a handicap. So let it not be a monologue. So if you can tell me your reasons of why do we publish?
Sir, to become a good researcher, sir.
To become a good researcher, very good. What
To
will
get a good
happen if,
rank. Sorry.
To
yeah,
venture new, genres.
sorry, I didn't get you to join.
To venture new genres. To venture
To
new
venture
areas.
into new areas. To venture into new areas. Okay. If you want to venture into new areas, why do you want to venture into new areas?
So it keeps us relevant.
So we learn more, we
It
research
keeps you
more, we
relevant.
get
You want to
knowledge
learn
more.
more. You'll get more knowledge. So can I put it this way that you want to share some ideas and results with fellow researchers and academics who are working in a similar area in which you are working in? Is that one of the motivations for publication? Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
Anything else? What happens when you publish? What happens? Is that the end of the story, or is there something else? What is usually the last stage of when you write a paper?
So new knowledge gets created, isn't it?
New knowledge gets uh, created. Very good.
So
Citation
problem solving
method.
method.
Problem solving. Very good. What else? What do you do in a paper towards the end? Usually we write something called
Citations.
before that.
Scope for further research.
Exactly. So you write something called scope for further research. So you want to live a record of research which can be further enhanced by other people. You don't want it to get stopped there. So because you're sharing the ideas and results with your fellow academics, you want your fellow academics to further build on the work that you have done. And why do you do this? You also, in turn, want some recognition for the ideas and the results that you have exhibited through your research work. You also want to attract interest from others in the area of research. You also want to get some feedback on your results and ideas. Many a times when we publish, when the reviewers give us reviews, it's a good place for us to sit back, look at the whole work, and say, "Oh, I've got some wonderful feedback. So this is very, very useful for me." And then, you also want to receive independent verification of the methods and results. So it's a good way for you to legitimize the findings, legitimize the methodology, legitimize the work that you have done. Of course, there are some more reasons beyond this, which are, there is an increasing expectation from the institute side. Um, Research is required on rankings, ratings, accreditations. Um, Today, if you are only teaching, most institutes won't really, give you that kind of opportunities, as opposed to if you are a multidimensional individual with teaching, research, and of course other things, including services as well. So therefore, that's another reason why we publish. Uh, there are reward structures which are there in institutions, but they're highly variable across institutions. But reward structures are there, and therefore we publish because there is a reward structure. But more importantly, high quality research is not about extrinsic or external rewards. It's more about intrinsic rewards. It's more about your own self motivation. You get motivated, you are interested in a particular study, you find a particular study to be very, very interesting and useful, and you want others to know about it, and therefore you do that. It's more of a an intrinsic reward than an external reward. Uh, there are a large number of educational institutions in India, and I'm talking only in India. In other countries also, the same thing is applicable. So a major differentiator among those institutions is research. High quality research attracts more high quality research in the institute, and therefore it creates a positive cycle. All right. So let's move on and look at the publication and why we publish, for what do we publish, what is the purpose, etc. So I'm taking you through what is called the communication matrix, and it has got 4 elements to it. So there is an audience for whom we are publishing. Now, who is the audience? The audience is someone who will read your paper. Now, who reads your paper?
Fellow academicians.
Fellow academicians.
Corporate trainers.
Yes, corporate trainers also. Fellow academicians working in the same or the similar areas or domain, right? So if you are working in a particular area, all those people who are working in the similar area, they will read your paper. Corporate trainers, very few, highly unlikely that they will take your paper and read it and then use it for training. But fellow academicians, yes. Is there anybody else who reads your paper? Somebody before the fellow academics.
Reviewers.
Exactly. So, you have to cross this gate. You have to cross this gate of editors and reviewers. Now, these people are often, they can be looked as the filters or the gatekeepers who do that first check and the final check. The editors do the first check and the reviewers, along with the editor.
Whether it has reduced with the medications or not. The subject and
Somebody's microphone is on. If you can switch it off, please. So you will have, the journal editors and the reviewers working as I was telling you, as filters. So their work only increases the value of your research work. What is the purpose? Which basically means, what do you want the paper to achieve? So for whom are you writing? What do you want the paper to achieve? How will you structure the paper? And what criteria will be used to decide if your writing is successful? This is the entire communication matrix, and this is what we are going to talk about over these 2 days. Why is it difficult to publish? It's difficult to publish for multiple reasons. A, not all research is new. Not all research is of sufficient interest. Not all research is impactful, and I will spend a little time on what is an impactful research, so you will understand why certain research immediately catches attention and why certain research do not. And during this entire process, what I'll do is I will share some of parts of my own research work, and I would like you to look at it and give me feedback in terms of whether what I'm saying makes sense or not. So we will look at all of those as we go along. Now, so therefore, not all research is new, not very interesting, not very impactful. Experiments do not always work. Only positive results are easier to publish. You can do an experimentation, but when you have a positive result and you can showcase that to the world, it is easier to get published. I will give a contradictory view to this as we go along a little later as well. Journals have specific requirements which can be difficult to meet. Navigating the publishing process is a tough job. So therefore, it is difficult to publish. when you write, before your work gets published, your idea gets criticized by the reviewers, by the editor, by associate editor, whoever the team is. So your ideas, your work gets criticized. Once it gets published, there is there is a very high chance that your idea again starts getting criticized by people. The good part about it is the more people talk about your work, the better it is for you, more citations you will get. Now, how do you simplify it? My first tip is draw an outline. I'm sure all of you do that. Break down the large task into smaller tasks of writing sections, subsections. Don't get into writing everything together. So get into smaller sections, smaller subsections. And once you've written something, give yourself a break for about 48 hours and then come back to it again. If you don't do that, whatever you have written in one flow, you will start getting stuck with that particular thinking process, and there won't be any improvement in the next version. Okay. Now, I said, we have to look at whether the research is impactful or not. So how do we know that a research is impactful or has the ability to influence? We can look at various dimensions of impact. One is whether the research has given new insights, new theory, or an extension of theory, new way of looking at things, new way of addressing concerns, etc. So anything which is an addition, either absolutely new or an addition. And I will tell you through my research paper, I will show you how we extend certain theory and then create a new framework, and that gets accepted in top journals. Now, if you look at the what of the impact, it has to be interesting, important, useful. That's it. How do we do it? The rigorous execution of research makes it possible. Why do we do it? It should provide the motivation for research. And as I told you, that we are all researchers self-motivated more than any other external award that comes our way. Impact is often enhanced by a focused research domain. All right. Now, if you look at a major work or a series of works on a focused topic, you will always find a way to take that in and create an impactful uh, research paper. Now, we know that truth is impactful. We all know that, research is a quest for truth. My question to you is, and this I want all of you to discuss with me, is research a quest for truth? Do you think research is a quest for truth? Do you think research will be impactful if it it discovers some truth?
Yes, sir.
If your answer is yes, why?
If it is not for truth, then for what else?
Okay, I will
It is
counter
it
it.
is it is to probably to unravel something which is hidden, which is not noticed by all. And if it is not truthful, then are we not gimmicking the world into believing something else?
Okay. Now, supposing I come up with an argument which is like this, that if there is an existing belief or existing assumption in your audience, and this has been going on for a long time, and I will, in a later slide, give you an example of a research which actually broke down a common understanding which economists have had for a long, long time. So, my counter argument now to you is that it need not be necessarily impactful if it is true. But if it refutes the belief, if it refutes the assumption of the audience, it has to be impactful. Do you agree with me? I want some, I
Yes, sir.
want some counterpoints in this, because one has to understand this very, very clearly. If you have understood this part clearly, then you know that you are not necessarily always searching for the truth. You are looking for something which is existing. You are bringing that out to the world, saying that this is existing and this is the way one has to look at it.
Sir, basically the
So,
research depends on assumptions only, na, sir. From assumptions only we
True,
formulate, based on the assumptions we will
true.
prove it whether it is true or not.
That's right. That's right. So, therefore, it need not be true to be impactful. Now, let's look at the second point I have raised. What is true today may not be true tomorrow. You agree with me?
The thing is, truth can be a matter of personal opinion as well, perspective.
I'm not talking about a perception or a perspective. I'm talking about hardcore research. In hardcore research, whatever is true today may not be true tomorrow. And we have umpteen examples of what is true today. Somebody else comes up and he finds out something else which becomes true then. I will,
sir,
yeah.
sir, is it like maybe in the psychological methods this is true, but in the fundamental sciences, what is true
Yes.
today will not change tomorrow, right, sir? So maybe,
Yes.
like
Yes.
for example, if we are studying the psychological theories, today what in general the perception would be, after a generation it may change. So that could be the argument here.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. In fundamental sciences, usually what is true remains true for a long, long time until and unless somebody finds a flaw in that particular research itself. So, if you are looking at the survival of the fittest, it has remained, and it will remain for centuries to come. But when we look at social problems, when we look at research, and I'm a management professor, so my more of my focus is on social sciences and allied areas. So you are right, absolutely correct. And therefore, my next point on this, that every theory that you talk about, especially in social sciences, but also in pure sciences, in some cases, ultimately gets proven wrong as new research emerges and new knowledge gets accumulated. So, therefore, you cannot have something which is true forever. And I'll keep giving examples. I will take you through certain researchers as we go along, and I will give you examples how even Nobel laureates have, gone wrong in certain assumptions. And these are famous studies, and we will discuss all of those. So, what matters is merely whether the research runs counter to what is currently assumed as true. That is interesting, that is impactful. Now, this basically has come from a research done in 1971 by a person called Davis. The title of the research was "That's Interesting Towards a Phenomenology of Sociology and a Sociology of Phenomenology." However, from the perspective of scientific research, as you truly said, one of you said this, his core argument that great theories have to be interesting and impactful is flawed. So I'm not necessarily talking from the point of pure sciences research, because if you were to look at it that way, then maybe in order to make something very interesting, an improper scientific result can come out. It may, also result in your post hoc hypothesis development, which many a times many researchers do. So therefore, yes, it can be very, very dangerous. So that is why I wanted all of us to discuss this point. So please keep in mind that Yeah, somebody wanted to say something?
Yeah, yes, sir. So, sir, in essence, we should always question the status quo. There is nothing like ultimate reality, and we should always be looking for new dimensions and question the established theories, etc. Is it a correct way
Absolutely.
to see?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is how we look at it. Yeah. Okay. Any other views? Any other views, or can we move on?
Sir, what we discussed about the truth or
If you can
the
tell your
whether
name also before you start talking, because I'm not seeing any one of you. I have only the
okay,
slide here, and I do
this is
not know
Bhaskar.
if,
This is
yeah,
Bhaskar speaking.
yes, Mr.
So
Bhaskar.
basically, my point and what I got confused about is uh, the last point that we discussed was the whether something is true or not, right? So we are going to. It doesn't matter whether we are going to unravel or not. But for me, what I understand is it more about whether the truth was significant for that time duration or not? So
Yes,
what
that
is
is what.
true, what is true will always be true. But whether it was significant at that time or not.
Okay, that is what I said. If you look at the second point, the truthfulness of a proposition is of a limited duration. What is true today may not be true tomorrow. So, therefore, when you say that is truth impactful, there is a question mark on that. But if we look at it purely from the, the perspective of scientific research, then probably there is a huge gap in this thinking. So, therefore, don't look at it as true for all kinds of discipline that we are talking about. This is largely from the social sciences point of view and not from the pure sciences point of view. Am I clear, Mr. Bhaskar?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Got clear.
Okay.
Thanks, sir.
Okay.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you. So let's move on. All right. So, I'm putting up a graph in front of you, which is kind of self explanatory. And this is something where most of the papers I've found go wrong. So, you have two types of strength. So, if you look at papers, either it is empirically strong or either it is conceptually strong. Now, needless to say that a paper which is both conceptually and empirically strong will stand the test of time, so will get accepted for publication. But then does it mean that you cannot have something which is conceptually strong accepted, or something which is empirically strong not accepted? No. So therefore, if you look at the conceptual strength, if you take a paper which is conceptually very, very strong, but does not exhibit empirical strength, that paper is also very, very well accepted among the fraternity. If you look at a paper which is, conceptually it is weak, but empirically it is strong, that also stands a chance. However, it stands a little lesser chance. But please be very careful about the weakness of both conceptual and empirical strength. So you should focus on something which is strong in either of these two, if not both of those. If it is strong conceptually, if it is strong empirically, both perfectly fine. If it is strong in either of these two, perfectly fine. You still have a very good chance of getting your paper accepted. Okay, how do you create impactful research? More on that. So, first of all, you have an idea, right? You start off with an idea. And when you start off with an idea, the idea, it may have a low strength or it may have a high strength. And then you have to execute that idea. The execution of that idea also you can do it really well, or you can do it, you can kind of mess it up. So you have a great idea and you have got a great execution, right? That's what we want. But if you've got an idea which is not great, an idea where the execution is not great, absolutely not desirable. So you will not succeed. But if you have got an idea which is very good, but the execution somewhere is limited, it is an option for you, and it is an option for the journal also to consider your research. Now, usually what happens in such cases, either this or where the execution is very good, but the idea was not that great, many a times the journal comes back to you. It comes back with saying that I particularly like the idea of your work. However, A, B, C, D, E. So which basically means that the strength of the idea is very good. Or if, let us say, the language of the editor is something like this, that the paper is methodologically very strong. However, you can look at strengthening and something the editor adds, which means the strength of the idea or the problem is not that great, but then there is a chance. So therefore, you should look at these two things very, very seriously. How good is your idea? Now, we all fall in love with our own ideas. Any idea that we think, it comes to our mind, we think that it is great. It may not necessarily be great. The moment when you start looking for the literature, you will understand that it's not really a great idea. Now, how do you convert that not so great idea into a great idea with the help of execution? That's important. When we go into the manuscript, we learn a lot more in terms of how do we do that. Now, the most ideal of the positions is where the strength of the idea and the strength of the execution is very high. Now, let's look at how do we look at the rigor and relevance of a particular research work. Once again, we look at theoretical strength or theoretical rigor, and we look at application or relevance on the other side. Now, if you look at the quadrants from low to high, we again see that anything which is theoretically weak and has very low application wise, it is not desirable. But if something which is theoretically very strong, application at this moment is not very high, but can have a long-term relevance, that may be accepted, or that would be accepted. So even if your application today does not look great, but then you can convince the reviewers and the editor that, look, this is something which 5 years down the line I anticipate is going to happen. I'll give you an example. If in the 80s somebody would have told you that there would be a day when the Walkman would get killed or the Discman would get killed, you don't need those, the VCRs, etc., all those would get killed, and everything, all of those would come in a computer. Of course, later we saw it came in your mobile phones as well. But if somebody were to talk about that and somebody were to say that these industries would get really killed, nobody would have accepted it. Only if you can theoretically create something which is very strong and then predict it, any journal would accept it, because it then shows that there is a long-term proposition that you are giving. If your application is very high, but theoretically it is weak, very few papers will accept it. So you'll have to be extremely careful about this. And of course, this is what is desirable, which is in your first quadrant. Now, why rigor and relevance is important is because that if you do not have proper rigor, then there is very the the work that you have done, or there is very little possibility of learning beyond a certain individual specific work that you have done, and nobody likes that. So therefore rigor is important. Rigor is not, please don't misunderstand me when I'm saying rigor. Rigor is not about the most sophisticated of the methodology that you are using. It does not mean the most sophisticated statistical tools that you are using. It is about the most appropriate methodology. It is about the quality of data. If the data quality is good and your methodology is appropriate, it is a very high rigor paper. If your data is good, your analysis is, there is a little bit of a lacking. The reviewers will send it back to you saying that do this, do that. But if your data is bad and you've done an excellent analysis, the reviewers will see that through. They will not accept it. So look at the please look at rigor from the quality of data. Please look at rigor from the quality of generalizability and learning beyond a certain individual case that you may be proposing. What about relevance? Now, relevance is important because your research should help solve some real world problems. Now, what kind of real world problems? It can be, alleviation of poverty. It can be on the healthcare side. It can be on education. Those should be solved by your research. So it has to have a real world application somewhere, either immediately or in the future, doesn't matter, but it has to have an application. Now, many a times when I review papers, I find that there is a very good, solid methodology used, but then the implications are very, very weak. So it does not show how the research would help somebody or something. So therefore, you have to understand that some or the other problem needs to get addressed from your research paper. Now, ideally, again, coming from a management school, we keep talking about it that academic research problems should ideally come from the industry and the society. However, what happens is because in India, we academicians, for the reasons that I mentioned earlier, have to get our work published, we then look for problems, search for those problems, and then try to find out ways to address those problems. So this is why I say that your paper both has to have rigor and relevance. Now, if you look at the changing research scenario, okay, technology has made sure that uh, you know a whole lot of ideas can emerge from any place. We have been traditionally very, very poor in terms of research from our country, but that is somewhere I'm finding over the last few years it's changing, and it will change. Um, you can have a paper published in any journal, and that can have high citations, high impact, etc. You Today, as an Indian, you have an opportunity to reach out to any global platform. So therefore, you can really uh, get your work noticed by the academics in the entire world. Uh, the other thing which Indians have started doing greatly is collaborating. Now, you will find that there are less and less sole or solo authored articles. you will find articles where you'll have 2, 3, 4 people collaborating and working. Uh, I love collaborating with my co-researchers from various parts of the world. It helps me get perspective. It helps me understand the newer ways of doing research. So I would strongly urge all of you to do that always. Collaborate. There are many instances where you would feel that, hey, I would do much better to, uh, you know, uh, do this work on my own, but I would suggest that don't get into that kind of a frame. Instead, look at who you can collaborate and work with nicely. Right. Of course, global collaborations possible due to technology. And the last part, which is extremely important, is that we are now getting into cross-disciplinary researchers. So therefore, unlike in the past, we don't have those strict silos. So if you looked at initially in one of the slides when I spoke about the areas I work with. Now my research has elements of supply chain, my research has elements of marketing, my research has elements of economics, my research has elements of sustainability. There are a few papers I have also collaborated on certain HR areas, so which is not my primary focus area, but then I've worked on that as well, because that is something which I found to be useful in somewhere else, some other place. So therefore, one can always look at that as a way to reach out to people from other uh, interest areas and create more impactful research papers. All right. So let's get into the stages of the research process. Now, what do you do? Where do you begin with? What is the first step of your research process? If you can tell me that.
Identification of the problem.
Identification of the problem, good. Once you've identified, then how do you start working on it?
Collecting the data, sir. Review of literature.
Review of literature, right? So, do you start with the literature or you start with a phenomenon? Which one?
Uh, we start with the phenomenon first.
We have to start with phenomenon.
You have
We
to
start with the
phenomenon.
literature, sir.
Okay. Now, those of you who think that we have to start with the literature, you may have your own reasons, right? And those reasons are pretty well known to us. Those are straightforward reasons because the literature contains what is known. It also gives you what are the models, what are the methods, and you can take those and then you can create your own small little, story. Uh, Now, the literature also gives you what kind of limitations did exist in the past, and therefore you can identify your research gap. Yes, that's something which is well known. But if you were to look at the other side, someone who is doing a research new, is there a downside to it? Is there a downside to starting with the literature and not with a phenomenon?
Exactly, sir.
Please elaborate.
A new one has to understand the methodology. That's why he has to go to review of literature, sir.
Okay, I'm giving you a counter argument now. Let's discuss this. Let's debate. I mean, I'm absolutely not comfortable without seeing you, but let's still discuss. Uh, what does literature contain? The literature contains established theories,
Yes, sir.
and it also contains those established theories by making a large number of assumptions. Now think about a young researcher. When a young researcher is going through those, he has already started believing those as gospel truth. So that, the fact that he believes that, it may color his perception of that particular field in which he's working, or the topic in which he's working. So he starts seeing his own research work through the work of all the researchers who have done the work before him. Yes or no?
Yes, yes, sir.
I'll give you an example. All of you know that there is something called first mover advantage in a market. So if you can go to the market early, your products will get sold first, right? So this is called the theory of first mover advantage. So it says that the first to enter a market will have a distinct advantage over those who enter later in the market. This is a very common knowledge. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Now, you would be stunned to know that this was the belief till 1993, when for the first time, two researchers, they started refuting this idea. They refuted this idea of a pioneering advantage or a first mover advantage. And they demonstrated that pioneers always do not have that advantage. In large cases, the pioneers fail, and how long-term market shares are rarely with the pioneer, market players. Now, just because they refuted a very strong theory in economics and in marketing, their proposition was very interesting, right? And impactful. So I told you I'll give you an example. So you see, there is something which is held true for a long, long time. Even today, if you ask someone whether there is something called a first mover advantage, and if every company which comes with a product first is in an advantageous position, you'll find 99 out of 100 people saying yes. But this paper, which was written by two people, Galder and Tellis, was a very, very interesting paper, which was contrary to what the usual belief was. Now, much later, I don't remember exactly, I think in 2011 or so, an Indian prof in US, Oded Shankar, from Ohio State University, he wrote a paper called Copycats: How Smart Companies Use Imitation to Gain a Strategic Edge. So his research was on how, the pioneer has come with the product, but then there is someone who has actually made a product based on the pioneering products features, but his market share is much better than that of the pioneering company. So you see now, between 93 and 2011, you have a corroboration of something which was earlier thought to be true, the 1993 paper as well. So you need to be looking at literature or a phenomenon from that particular view. All right. So anyways, we all know understanding, integrating the literature issues, these are important. Problem formulation and positioning are important. So you need to identify the gap, justify the gap. You need to replicate prior results, which are important. You have to implement in that research. You have to assemble and write the first full working draft. Once you've done that, and then, as I said, give yourself time, revise, polish, iteration 1, 2, 3, God knows how many iterations until you are ready, submission to the journal, Submission to the journal again is not very simple process, so therefore it takes time. So please give that much time. Please have that patience, and then the publication process starts. Publication process, of course, will take his own time. So therefore, if you look at the stages of the research process, it sometimes can be a little daunting. But anyways, let's come to the next part where we'll look at how do you prepare to write the manuscript. Very simple. Take one page, write one page, problem definition and justification. What is new and why addressing the problem is important. Now, many a times when you're writing a paper, you forget to do this. So I would urge all of you to sit down, look at what is new. What is it that is compelling? How is it going to be impactful? What, problem does it address? And something which is important for the audience, something which is important for the society or for the group for whom you're working in. You have to talk about the data collection. What story will the data tell? Is this the best package of data to concentrate on? Should you include more data? Should you remove some data? How will you tell a coherent story with the data that you have collected? What results do the data give? So you should write down the take-home messages. These are things which you have to look at very early when you are preparing to write the manuscript. Write bullet points on possible ideas to include in the discussion. How will the research change scholarly thinking, impact managerial practice, or contribute to society? And then, what is the future merit of the research? This I'm saying one page, one page. If you notice here, I'm saying one page here, because the moment you start writing more at one go, you will lose track. Especially uh, you know, those people who have multiple work at the same time. Say, for example, you have to go to the class and then come back, and then you have a little time for research, and then go to another class, etc. So it's difficult. So I've given you one tip: just in smaller doses, do that. Do not be in a hurry to complete everything at one go. Right. Let's move on. So this is something which is interesting. There has to be a structure of the paper. Now, this is going on for a long time. For the first time in the 17th century, if I'm not wrong, somewhere around 1660 or 1670, this thing came up in terms of a a set of conventions for writing the research paper. Now, if you notice, there is something missing here. Can you tell me what?
Scope for further research, limitations.
All those things you can bring it under discussion and say A, B, C, D, whatever.
References.
Something is missing.
Objectives.
Reference, anyways. No, I'm just talking about the main body part. Yeah.
Analysis.
Title.
Conclusion.
Okay.
Scope of work.
Okay.
Conclusion.
Okay. Literature review is not there here. So we'll take up literature review separately in this as we go along. Okay. All the other things that you have spoken are actually part in some or the other way of each of these things. We'll take it up one by one. What are the important things in an abstract? What does abstract do?
It is the complete description of your research paper.
complete description of the research paper. So if you can, if you can split this up into A, B, C, D, E, what does an abstract, what should an abstract contain?
It contains about
Uh,
your findings
an
and
abstract
conclusions.
gives the overview of the whole thesis or paper.
Okay,
Briefly
so
analyze.
one second, one at a time. So is this correct? Overall purpose of the study?
Basically, it gives a snapshot of the entire work
Yes, sir.
you are presenting.
It gives
Yes,
snapshot of the
Entire work which you are presenting in the paper.
No, you have to be specific.
Basically,
What do you
it
mean by
provides a
snapshot?
snapshot in the sense the highlights of the work, the highlights of the paper, in a one-liner kind of thing, in a very short way. The intro,
What does
the
highlight of the paper
the
mean?
need, the purpose, the methods, and what exactly it is
Overview.
trying to accomplish.
Need and purpose we have already spoken about.
Objectives of the paper.
It presents the crux of the paper.
I think it would be the findings of the research. Findings.
Okay, hold it. Findings, very good. Hold it. Something else?
Summary of the paper work.
Methodology and finding.
No. Summary of the paperwork. Please come again. Exactly what summary?
Methodology and finding.
What is that? Sorry, I couldn't get you.
It's describe the methodology and finding of the paper.
Describes the methodology and finding. So you have all said everything. So,
Sir, can I add one more point?
yes, please.
Maybe in the abstract we will we'll describe what is the established position of this theory and
No,
what is the
no,
finding.
No, we do not.
Okay.
In abstract, we do not talk about what is established. That we will do in introduction. So let me now take, all of you have given some of the other points, and together you have covered everything that is needed. So if you look at it now, so somebody said this, but I was looking for this word, methodology, the basic design or the approach of the study. So you will not only write the purpose, you'll also write how you findings.
Yes, sir.
Major findings arrived at as a result of the analysis of the data. Okay? And then somebody said this, a brief summary of the research interpretations, a brief summary of the conclusions. So you will write that, and also in a way, use words which will also establish that it's an original work, right? So your abstract should have all of these things. Now, many a times, what happens is when you have sent a paper, and as a reviewer, when I read the abstract, I just get, disconnected immediately after I read the abstract because it does not contain all of these. So please make a note. At the end of the program, I will share this slide with all of you. So please make a note. And I will also give you a checklist at the end of the program. So the checklist will have everything in abstract, what you have to do, in introduction, what you have to do. So you can just, put whether you have completed that or not, whether you have completed this or not. So the checklist will give you all those details. But let's stick to abstract first. So the abstract has to have the purpose, it has to have the design and the methodology, it has to have the results of the analysis, the findings arrived at as a result of the analysis, it has to have a summary of the research interpretations and conclusions. So these are the must, things that the abstract should have. The other thing that you have to be extremely careful about is what is the abstract guideline of the journal. Every journal has a word limit. So please look at that also. You cannot cross that word limit by any means. Right? Can we move on?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So I will, take you to the next slide, which is basically a comment from my side as a reviewer on introduction. But before that, let me ask you, what do you think are, like we saw, what are the things which are must in an abstract? What are the things which are must in introduction?
Sir? Subhendu, sir?
Yeah.
Divya here. I had a small query about writing abstracts.
Yes.
Now, in different publications and different journals, they will have specific character length saying that it has to be within 200 words, 300
I
words.
lost you. I lost you. If you can repeat it, please.
Yes, sir. Are you able to hear me now?
Yes, very clearly.
Okay. So what I was asking is, different journals ask for the abstract to be of different character length. So there may be some that say it should be within 300 words or 250 words, however that. If we have to put it that concisely, among all of what we discussed in the previous slide, which ones could we keep very short and which ones need to be written in, for sure?
Okay. So let me go back to the previous slide once again. None of these can be, done away with.
Or left out.
Yes. So you have to have each of these in the abstract. So now, in terms of if a particular journal has a little more word limit, it is not necessary that if somebody has said you can use 500 words, that you have to use 500 words. It's okay to use 300 words, not an issue. But then those 300 words should have each of these elements present there. So you cannot have an abstract without, let's say, the findings being mentioned there.
Got it. Okay.
Right. So,
yes.
So it is a maximum of 500 words. If if in the process you find that there is another part of the methodology which will make the abstract more interesting and impactful to the reader, please go ahead and add it, because you still have a few more words left. Okay. But just because you have more words, it is not necessary that you have to fill that up somehow.
Got it. No, sir, because with me, my question was more to do with what to do if that is expected to be even shorter than what we would have expected it to be. So instead of what I thought of to be
I'll give you,
yes.
I'll give you, if you look at, let's say, a typical journal's abstract, and if you look at something like 350 words or so, it is good enough to have all these 4 points covered.
Okay.
So if you want to look at, I will do one thing. I will share one of my papers. In any case, I'm going to share the introduction of one of my papers, and we will do an activity. And in that, I will show you exactly what and how we do it. So if you want, I can give you the abstract also, and we can see whether those things are covered or not. So that will give you an idea. Right?
Yes, thank you so much. Yes, sir.
Okay. Can we move on to the introduction part?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So my question to all of you was, how do you write an introduction? What are the things that you cover in the introduction section?
About the research topic.
About the research topic? Okay.
Set the context with the existing knowledge.
Okay, very good.
As to why we are doing that work and why we are writing that paper.
Okay.
Purpose of the research.
Purpose of the research. Very good.
Scope of work.
Very good.
Research problems and research gaps.
Justification of problem.
Objectives of the study.
Okay.
Topic
Why
relevant.
it is relevant now?
Okay, very good. Excellent.
Since introduction is an opening chapter, so whatever we have done in that particular study, we mentioned that in the introduction part.
Okay.
All the methodologies used in this.
Okay. All of these, but these things come in a particular structure. If you look at some of the top ABDC journals, or if you look at Scopus Q1 journals, you'll find that there is a particular way in which you have to write it. Now, this is basically my comment, and I give you half a minute to go through this, and then we will discuss this in details. So we are talking, if you look at it, in the introduction, we are essentially talking about three major parts. The first part, as I'm saying here, gives the state of the literature. Basically, it is about what is known in the subject of your research. So what is known is extremely important, and that comes upfront. Then the second part talks about what is missing and why it matters. So what is not known, and why is it important for you to tell what is not known, and therefore create something to tell that, look, now this is a new knowledge, this is a new concept, this is a new theory or an extension of a theory. And the third part is on how the paper is going to address this gap, and it also gives you the structure of the paper. So this is a typical reviewer's comment on the introduction section. And many of you who would have received the reviewer's comments, you would have found something similar to this written. Now, let me share, I've shared something with you. If you could please open that. It is a link has been sent to you.
So it requires access. We don't have access to it.
You want an access. How does one give access? 1 second, let me check it. Just give me a second. Yes, I've opened it. Can you download it?
Yes, sir. We are able to download.
Yes,
You're able
sir.
to download it? Okay. So what I would like you to do is, I'm going to put up the next slide. Before that, let me just take you through the process that I mentioned just now. So first, you have to locate your research in the existing space, which means you have to look at what kind of work already has been done, etc., and then look at areas and sub areas in as much detail as you can. So use the existing literature to construct a gap that your study can fill and justify your gap. Demonstrate that gap, and when you demonstrate the gap, you will see when you read the research papers, these are the common terms that people use. However, this has not been done, or rarely do we find any work in this particular area. In the current context, it is presently unclear as to what exactly is the work done in this, or it still remains a major challenge. So some of these kind of works you'll find which demonstrates the gap, and then you give the statement of purpose or the main activity. All right. So now let's move on to one activity. What I would like you to do is read that introduction. It is from one of my papers, and I would like you to highlight the, sentences which describe the background, describing what is known on the subject, what is known, not known, what elements are still subject to controversy. Meaning, I've just written controversy does not mean there is a controversy here, but what is still not known. There is a little bit of uh, 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 an element of controversy in what I've written there. But anyways, what is the exact gap in the knowledge, cite any existing data, etc., all that. What is the objective structure of the paper? So this is blank for all of you. Now I would like you to take a little gap, about 5 minutes. What's the time now? It's 7:45. Bholanath sir, can I take another 15 minutes more? 8:15? If for the participants it is fine.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So what I would like you to do is take about 5 minutes, read the introduction, and search for the places where the background describing what is known in the subject is there, the next what is not known is there, and then we will discuss this.
Sir, one doubt.
Yes, please.
The structure of the paper, what are we supposed to do there? Should we highlight something in the introduction?
Yes. In the introduction, just quickly glance through the introduction.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, this may not be your subject area, but unfortunately, I cannot get into a research paper for every research area.
I understand.
Right.
Yes.
So I've given something which is very easy to read and understand, but I want you to identify whether each of these are existing in this introduction or not.
Yes.
This is from one of my papers, which is published in an ABDC A journal.
Understood, sir. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, could you find out where the background describing what is known on the subject is written? Please go to para 5. In paragraph 5, it says we investigate market development among farmers and undertake an extension, etc., etc., etc. So this is known in the subject, and then we investigate it. Okay. So what is known in the subject is given in the introduction, and that's not the only place. It is given in many places also. Now the second thing we wanted to find out is what is not known. So if you look at para 4, you'll find this written: while the 4A framework does identify drivers of market development, etc., extant literature suggests that there are many other drivers. So which basically means that we are looking at extending the 4A framework to something else, maybe 5A, 6A, 7A, whatever. But we are trying to look at extending that particular framework because we find that there may be other drivers of market development in the subsistence marketplaces. Subsistence marketplaces are very typical in their approach because here mostly the sellers and buyers are all very poor, earning less than $2 a day. So therefore, their structure is not a typical marketplace which you and me go to purchase our stuff. So we looked at what are the drivers which are additionally required apart from 4A. So that is not known. We have looked at that. Then we also said somewhere that in the existing frameworks, I think it is in the third paragraph, if you look at it, you'll find in the absence of existing frameworks, that is 4A, 5A framework, etc., all that, especially conspicuous is the absence of factors. So what is the reason? So there are factors that may provide infrastructure and resource related help that is much required for subsistence level entrepreneurs in the emerging markets, and that is missing. So the objective of this paper is to investigate the market development process in subsistence marketplaces, etc., etc., etc. So this gap has been very clearly identified. Then if you look at I think it is again in the fourth paragraph. Hence, this research aims to fill an important gap in the marketing literature, whereby it presents an updated set of A's that are applicable for understanding market development in subsistence marketplaces. So, is this clear to all of you? Now, what is it doing? It is exactly hitting everywhere what is not known and how this research wants to address this particular gap. Am I clear, all of you? This is extremely important for all of you to understand. The first thing that I, as a reviewer, and I'm also putting my reviewer's hat when I'm talking to you, I do is I very keenly read the introduction because that is where I get the first feel whether this paper is really well written or not. So introduction, extremely important, and these, what I'm saying as the features, are the must inclusions in an introduction. Clear? Now let's look at...
Sir?
Yes, please.
One small doubt, sir. Maybe I may sound a little naive. See, when I see your introduction, sir, there are so many citations. That means you have read a lot of papers and then you have prepared this. So now how much is enough or how much is too much when we do this kind of study? How much we should include? Is everything which has this particular framework called 4A, everything should be brought in here, or is there something
I will address this. I got your point. I will address this when we go to the literature review section, and I will, though I did not want to have a big literature review thing in it, but I will cover that and I will tell you how much is enough and when you should stop. That's essentially your question.
Yes, sir.
Isn't
Thank
it?
you. Yes, sir. Yes.
Right.
Thank
I
you.
will do that. I will remember it, and in case I will address it. But in case if I have not, please remind me at that point in time, and I will show you exactly there in terms of what is enough. Okay.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you.
The simple rule is there that you have to, the moment you find the similar kind of things coming back again, you stop there. So many papers will have a similar view but presented differently. So that's a thumb rule we follow. But this introduction, all the papers that are there in the in-text citations, these are these are absolutely must. And this is how typically an introduction has to be written. There is no second way of writing an introduction if you want to get it published in a top journal. All right.
Yes, sir.
So what is the objective? For the objective, if you go to the third page, you'll find our findings identify 3 new A's. So this is what we were working for. We wanted to find out certain additional A's which will help the players of the subsistence marketplaces. So that's the objective. Could you locate it? It's in page number 3. It is in the 6th paragraph, if I'm not wrong. Then the structure of the paper, if you look at the last paragraph, you'll find rest of the article is structured as follows. Could you find that, all of you? Just look at the last paragraph.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So this is typically how an introduction has to be written. Am I clear?
Yes, sir.
Can we move on? Can we move on? Okay. Now I'm putting up something which is again very important. So, for introduction, I said certain things are important. So what is the current state of knowledge, etc., all that. But what is more important is what is the kind of grammar that you would need. So I've put down this here. This is a ready reckoner for all of you. So when we describe the current state of knowledge, we use a present tense. And I've given you an example. So you can look at that example. So this is from, I think, the 2nd paragraph. Extant research offers several frameworks, etc., etc., etc. When you describe observations previously published, you'll use past imperfect. So Commande and Jarhold proposed something. When you describe a process that has been attempted but has not been fully addressed, you'll write present perfect. While Abendroth and Pels have extended this, whatever. Okay. So you will use those tenses depending on which part and what are you writing in the introduction. Now this is extremely important. This is extremely important because if there is a problem in basic English, 1 is basic structuring, 2 is basic English. If there is a problem in basic English, then immediately from the reviewer's desk itself, it will get rejected. And there is nothing worse than a desk rejection. So therefore, this is important. Please make a note of this. I will anyway share this presentation with you so you can make a proper checklist out of this. All right, let's move on. So we see that introduction has a lot of literature. but then it also is followed by an in-depth study of the literature, because if I look at the area in which I'm working and I have not studied the entire literature, then it does not make any sense my saying that there is a gap here, because somebody may have worked in that area. It's simply that I don't know. And if I don't know, does not mean that that work has not happened. So therefore, it is extremely important that an in-depth study of the literature is done. So
Sir?
let's look at, yeah.
Sir, can you please give us some example, like how to frame hypothesis, like in accordance with the tenses you just gave us that table?
Okay.
According to that, like how
See,
we will formulate our
if you look at,
hypothesis.
So in hypothesis, when you're writing it, I've given an example. We hypothesized that, and then in my case, say for example, if I have to write this, so I'll say we hypothesized that 4A would not be sufficient to explain the market drivers in the context of subsistence marketplaces or players in the subsistence marketplaces, and hence there is a requirement for this. So that is, I'm putting it in textual form. If you're not putting it in textual form, it does not matter. Then you will just write H0 and H1. That's it.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Right? Yeah. All right. Now, literature review. I'm just skipping this. This is from a very old journal, which is about a 90-year-plus-year-old journal, where the editor's view about the state-of-the-art literature reviews is mentioned here. You can later read this. I'll skip this because I have to cover something more important before we call it off the day today. So what is basically literature review? Basically, literature review is, I can look at it in two parts. One is the process. The process is about understanding what is existing today in the form of knowledge. So the existing literature. And then how your literature, how your research will contribute to it. So that's the process. What is the product? The product is the document. So you demonstrate this through the document. And we saw what are the audience for your paper. Similarly, what is the audience for your literature reviews? The audience for your literature reviews, apart from academics, and of course your reviewers, etc., will also contain industry, consultancy, government. They are more interested in the literature review because that is where they get a summary of the whole work that has been done in that particular area. So it's basically, you can, in simple terms, write it as a relationship between thinking, knowledge production, and writing. So that's, in a nutshell, what literature review is about. Now, what should literature review do? Again, some tips. So look at this very carefully. It should clearly articulate what research needs to be done, why it is important, the practical significance, synthesize prior research, get all the prior researchers together, gain a new perspective, critically analyze the research methods used. So if you look at the highlighted ones, that is what exactly what a literature review does. So what I'm doing is I'm putting up a very commonly used standards and criteria of a literature review, which was given by David Booth and Penny Bale. These are professors from the University of Central Florida. They developed a framework from which to analyze literature reviews, and the framework contains 5 categories or 5 standards and 12 items or 12 criteria. So let's look at the first category. The first category is coverage. Now, coverage assesses how well a researcher justifies the criteria for inclusion or exclusion of the past work from the review. So basically, when you do your literature review, and later, not today, tomorrow, I will explain something wherein, you may have tons of papers in front of you, but what do you do with those tons of papers? So some of those papers will be useful, some of those papers will not be useful. So some you include, some you exclude, some you include at a certain stage and then exclude at a later stage, all that. But I'm not getting into details of literature review here because the purpose of this workshop is slightly different. But what is important is that, you know, whether a literature, if it has been included or it has been excluded, whether you are able to justify the criteria of that very, very clearly or not. So that is extremely important. The second category is synthesis. It consists of criteria B to criteria G. And it is designed to gauge how well the author has summarized, analyzed, and synthesized the literature in the given topic. So this, this kind of enables the researcher to combine a number of papers into a whole, which we call the literature, gain a new perspective on it, and also clarify what has been done in the past and what still needs to be done. So this synthesis, this category is an extremely important category. This is where the heart of the literature review lies in. Let's look at the next category, which is methodology. So two criteria, H and I, this constitute the category methodology. Criteria H measures how well the researcher has identified the main methodologies and the research techniques, and how well he has analyzed the advantages and disadvantages of those methodologies. Criteria I evaluates how well the researcher's literature review have related ideas and theories to research methodologies. So that's again something which I spoke during, when I was talking about whether it's an impactful research or not. So if you look at it, similar kind of things would keep coming back again and again in each of those areas, because that's where you make the cut for a publication or a rejection. Now, the next category is significance, which is about how well the research has rationalized the practical and scholarly significance of the topic. So you will have to look at both the sides, the practical side and the scholarly side. At a minimum, a research should discuss both the scholarly and the practical sides, but you also can look at any ambiguities, any shortcomings in any of these and push that in. So there are research papers which are more scholarly in their orientation, and there are some research papers which are more practical, but both should be there. So something, if you notice, I have spoken about previously also in terms of the conceptual and empirical research. The last one is rhetoric, which is basically how is the literature review written? Was it coherent? Is the structuring great? Is it supported by the review, etc.? So that is something which is extremely important. Now, I will again share this with you. You can, right now it's difficult for you to read this whole thing. So there is a scoring rubric, literature review scoring rubric, which means that once you've written a literature review, you can, through this rubric, check whether everything that you wanted to put into the literature review based on Boot and Beale's model is kind of covered or not. So once I share this presentation with you, you can have this rubric, and this will be very useful for you. So with that, I end today's session. And if quickly 1 or 2 questions are there, I can answer that, and I'll see you tomorrow then.
Can you listen to me? Yes, sir.
Yes, yes, I can. Please.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much for your specific and nice presentation. I have a simple question regarding research gap. So, as a researcher, new researcher, how can we identify our research gap very quickly and systematically? Would you please some tips how to identify research gaps?
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
I will take you through my experience, and if that helps, I'll be glad. So, say for example, if I talk about this particular research, that the introduction that you read. So, if you look at this research, I took a farmers market in India, and when I took that farmers market, my initial this thing was to study the market drivers in that particular farmers market. Now that's a very vague kind of a trigger that I had. Right? You agree that's not a research topic. Correct?
Yes.
So
yes, sir.
then what do we do? One second. Let me just come out of this and put the video on at least, so I can see all of you. You can see me. Oh, somebody said. See, one thing which I'm finding that there are quite a few comments which have come for the exercise, send the paper link again, etc. All that. Okay. All right. If there is a problem, because I'm not seeing all of you, I would request all of you to to stop me and ask that question right away, then and there itself. So that would help. Otherwise, I would not be knowing whether you have missed something, and I would go on in my own flow. As I said, this is a problem that that this particular media has. However, yeah, let's come back to yes.
Research gaps, sir.
Okay. So therefore, that trigger, was very vague one. If you look at it, what do you do with that? So immediately the next thing I did was I looked at, okay, when I'm trying to look at the gap in the farmers market, can I look at the same thing in another context in another emerging market? So therefore, I contacted one of my co-researchers in Vietnam, and then we discussed this and came to the idea that we are now going to study subsistence marketplaces. Subsistence marketplaces with the market drivers that exist, is there a gap in that? So that started formulating that research idea. And once that got established, then we started studying the literature. And we found that yes, the market drivers were absent. So a trigger, then your literature review, you will get your ideas coming up one after the other.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Sir, review of literature we need to do, you said. What are the sources of journals and articles we can get, sir?
Okay, I will cover that also in tomorrow's thing. So that is also there. So you will have to just, bear with me. It is there in tomorrow's this thing.
Yes, sir.
Professor Sarita has raised her hand.
Can I ask my...
Okay, yeah.
Sir, can you please present the screen once, the PPT, the last couple of slides particularly? When the criteria you were telling about literature review, sir, the A, B, C, D. So is it that every paper that we go through, we have to identify these sections from that paper, some kind of a classification of all the papers, and as a summary, we have to present it in the literature review. Or how is it, sir? That I am not able to understand that.
Okay, so this is basically, this is basically a rubric which has been given. When I share it with you, you will understand that better. I'll do one thing. Before the start of the session tomorrow, I will share it with all of you. Okay. So what you can do is you can go through the rubric. You will understand. Say, for example, what is the rubric? Rubric is if I have done a work, if I've done half of it, if I've done 70% of it, if I've done 60%, 80% of it, right? So the rubric tells me whether I've done completely, whether I've not done completely. So from the rubric, when you read your literature review and you go back to the rubric, you can only yourself assess whether the writing has been proper or not. So the rubric helps you do that.
Okay, sir. Sir, are there going to be any exercises so that we can understand this better tomorrow sometime?
Yes, there are some exercises. Now, can we, Bholanat sir, with your permission, can we have a little extended session tomorrow? Because there are certain exercises which are planned. Now, that may take a little more time. So if you permit, then we can. And for everybody else, if you can, if you can extend beyond 8 o'clock and maybe 8:39 types, it would be a very useful thing to do. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot.
So I will share the PPT, but I will not share it right now. I'll share it tomorrow at the beginning of the session, and then you can, look at the rubric also. Related to the rubric also, if you have any queries, you can ask me then.
Hello.
Yes.
Yes, I do have a problem. I am unable to join the WhatsApp group. I've tried a few times with the provided link, but I'm unable to join. Okay, fine. Okay, thank you.
Fine. So, yeah. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye. Bye, everybody. Professor Rahman. Okay.
Can you listen to me, sir? Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. So glad
Wonderful.
of you. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. See you tomorrow.